set it. But if we get questions from YouTube, I'm just going to put them in chat for you. And if they're like lengthy, I'll try to summarize them or something.
Okay. I want to test my animation here. Yeah, okay, it works. Good. All righty then.
Now streaming on YouTube. There we go. Good. And since we have that, I guess I don't need to also record. Okay, good. Marianne, you have the little bio on Carol?
Yes, I do. Carol gave me her bio.
I'm going to mute myself. Carol, your monitor's gotten out of it. Yeah, there, that's fine.
What happened? Maybe it's something I can fix.
If you sit back, it's good, but when you, yeah, right.
Okay, one more book.
There we go.
Most of the time you'll be seeing slides, so it won't really matter where my head is.
I was using books this afternoon to try and center it. It's a challenge.
It is.
Good. All right. Okay. Well,
Okay. Well, it is 6:30, so I'm going to begin. I want to welcome everyone to our community education presentation by the League of Women Voters of Solano County. And my name is Mary Ann Perlmutter. I'm the Voter Services Administrator. With us tonight is Niles Metters, our president, who will be managing our Zoom meeting for Zoom participants, and will be managing that chat room and the Q&A afterwards. And for our Zoom participants, we'd ask that you mute your speakers while the presentation is being delivered. We also welcome our public participants onto our YouTube channel. And we're excited to have you all here. And the chat room for YouTube will be managed by our tech expert, Danielle Creeder, who is here tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about redistricting. It happens every 10 years following the census. The state of California has an independent commission to do this, and the public will be invited for input. So it's important for everyone to understand what this process is, and that's why we're having this presentation. Our speaker tonight is Ms. Carol Moon Goldberg, and Ms. Goldberg is a president of the League of Women Voters of California and its related education fund. She is a 25-year league member, and she is from Sacramento. She has served on the board of directors for the last 6 years, working on voter service projects for 4 of those. And she was an analyst of reproductive rights legislation prior to that. She is dedicated to the League's mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. The presentation tonight is entitled Redistricting: What It Is, Why It's Important, and How You Can Influence It. And we want to welcome Ms. Goldberg this evening. We're honored to have her, and I'll leave the presentation to her.
Oh, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Empowering voters and defending democracy. That is part of redistricting. That fits in with our theme very clearly, because redistricting is an effort to make sure voters are empowered, that they have a voice in their districts, in choosing their elected officials, and in being able to hold them accountable. And in the process, that is defending democracy. So let's get moving. For some strange reason, my slide won't advance. This is not good. Hold on a minute. I am frozen. Can we stop screen share? Because I can't get a cursor to turn up or anything. I am so sorry.
I think I think your screen must be frozen. I can't.
Yeah, it is, because I have no cursor and I'm not advancing. I am sorry, everybody. And we practiced this before we got started. Honest.
I think I disabled it.
Okay. Let me see what I can do here. There. Now it works. Okay. How's this? Everyone see me?
Yep.
Excellent. Sorry about that. We tried. All right. What is redistricting? Well, see the hand-drawn lines? That's what redistricting is. Short and simple. The purpose of redistricting is to draw the lines for our legislative bodies, whether it's for Congress, it's for the state Senate, it's for the state assembly, or the Board of Equalization at the state level. The US Constitution requires that political districts have the same number of residents in them. It's called the principle of population equality, otherwise known as one person, one vote. They don't have to be exactly equal, but they need to be really close. The goal of population equality is to make sure that each member of Congress represents the same number of people. Now, this is true for districts at all levels of government, not just Congress. Now, we start out with equal population, 5 in each, but people move. They shift around. They move from one district to the next. And pretty soon the districts in the course of 10 years are unequal. So that's why we do this every 10 years. The redrawing comes to equalize the population, and the redrawing is based on the current census data, which, as we all know, takes place once every 10 years and has done so since 1790. With those census data, we see that the new lines, the solid black lines, not the little blue dotted ones, that's the new lines. And you will see that now they are equal in population. So that's the goal of this. That's part of what we want to do, is to make sure every person has equal representation by drawing districts with equal number of residents. As I said, not necessarily an equal number of voters, an equal number of residents, all residents, because everyone is involved when a law is made. Everyone is subject to that law. And so it's important that they are represented. So why does redistricting matter? Well, it matters for a variety of reasons. One of which is, sorry, I got two laptops going. It determines whose voices are being heard. We've all heard about the phrase gerrymandering and how that's done for purposes of maintaining political power by the political parties that operate in this country. There are other ways that gerrymandering can occur. It's designed to help. You can take a look at this slide, whose voices are being heard. If you look at the squares here, you will see that in this example, minorities make up only 1/4 of each district. Each district in this example has 4 people in it. That's 1/4, but it can be drawn differently. Here's one where minorities make up 3/4 of one district. That gives more voice to those people, at least in that one district, if not in the others. So for California, as mentioned, redistricting is done by the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. That commission was created in 2010. Actually, it started in 2010. It was passed into law by a proposition in 2008. Prior to 2008, the legislature was solely responsible for drawing congressional, state senate, state assembly, and Board of Equalization districts. They had complete power over it. If they couldn't agree to maps, it would get sent off to the court system to draw for them, to settle it for them. After 2008, Citizens Redistricting Commission was created and operated for the first time in 2010. And that commission is given the job of drawing the congressional, the state senate, the state assembly, and the Board of Equalization districts. Now, redistricting is not just at the state level. It has many levels. We have local redistricting as well. If you take a look at the map, you will see the black dotted lines. Those are just congressional districts. But cities and counties, special districts like school districts, they also have districts. So you can see one or more little ones. It's the little stuff that counts too. Local redistricting is controlled by a number of bodies. The county boards of supervisors in most counties have control of redistricting, and city councils in many cities. School boards do it on their own. Special districts do it on their own for the most part. Now, on a few situations, counties and cities have created their own independent citizens redistricting commissions, and they are trying to operate very similar to what the statewide district does. There are some new laws for the cities and counties that sort of echo what applies to the state redistricting, in the sense of creating criteria for drawing those lines that create a standard for how much public outreach there should be, and the fact that there should be any in the first place. Standards for public hearings, how many there should be, what kind of notice there should be. All of that sort of information is now being applied to cities and counties of a certain size. Beyond that, There are still cities and school districts, K through 12 and community college. They have some different rules. They handle things a little bit differently. Water districts and things like that also have different rules. The law that governs the drawing of city and county lines does not govern those, except for large special districts. So what is the process for all of this? The process starts out with, first of all, the release of census data. That triggers the redistricting process. Now, in 2020, as with all things involving 2020, the process hit some speed bumps, shall we say. They weren't able to do the door-to-door information collection that is so vital to getting an accurate census. All of that was put off for a long time. And so we don't exactly know when the census data will be released. The most recent information we have is that the data will be released sometime in August, maybe middle August, maybe not until September, maybe even later towards the end of September. It's just not clear at this point. The figures that you've heard about probably on the news about how California is losing the congressional district, those are census data figures that they're using. However, it is not refined down to the point where they can see how many people live in a county or a city. They're just looking at gross population in the state. That's all they're looking at. And then there's a formula for apportionment because there are only 435 congressional seats and they have to be divided up among all the states in this country. So the data that you hear about is just a gross number for how many people live in the state of California. It doesn't reach the level of how many people live in a county or a city. That data will come out much later, probably late summer, early fall at the best. So at all levels of redistricting, public input process can actually start before the census data starts. And that means that if the redistricting commissions or the boards of supervisors or the cities are so inclined, actually the state redistricting commission has to do this, they start seeking public input from the outset, giving the opportunity for members of the public to come forward and talk about what they think ought to be in a district, what areas should be in a district. So that process is starting already. That information plus the census data gets fed into the redistricting commission, which then has experts to help them with line drawing, all sorts of number crunching by computers. It's really amazing now. And eventually they will generate a set of draft maps, which then have to be presented to the public so that the public can comment on those maps. Now, we're not entirely sure when that's going to happen. Again, it's all hinged on when the actual important broken down data is available. So everyone's sort of playing it by ear. But we expect to see drafts maybe late November, sometime in December. It's just not clear, but keep your eyes peeled. There is opportunity for public hearings and public comment on that. And certainly we urge you to avail yourself of that ability to do it. So the State Commission must draw the draft maps. They must hold hearings on them. And based on 10 years ago, when the first time we did this process, there was a lot of comment coming in response to those maps. I think when people see something concrete, then they're moved to make some statements and talk about the maps. So I mentioned earlier, ranked criteria. The ranked criteria mean basically there's a list of standards. The top one, the most important one you'll see in this graphic, equal population. That is the most important one. Compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, that's really, really important. There's also a California Voting Rights Act, you must comply with that as well. In addition, the district that's drawn must be contiguous. So it must be, all parts of the district must touch part of the district. This is a hard thing to visualize, but imagine maybe a small bay, kind of an inverted C-shaped bay. You can't create a district running north and south across the bay so that the westernmost parts are actually of that district. The westernmost parts of that district are actually separated by a body of water. That would make them not contiguous. If you could close the bay, they could touch each other, that would be contiguous. That prevents the sort of oddly shaped things that you see. It prevents maybe some line drawing that involves swooping in and picking up one neighborhood that is completely separate from the rest of the district. The other thing that is required is that the community of interest must be preserved. And finally, the district must be geographically compact. Most of the time, that means not all spread out and scraggly looking. It doesn't mean it has to be like a perfect rectangle or something like that. It doesn't have to be that. And actually the compactness, you notice, is at the very bottom of the list. So it's kind of the least important thing. It's one thing though that people seem to focus on a great deal. So here we have our people. There are some lines being drawn. So what is a community of interest? The definition of a community of interest in the California Constitution is a contiguous population that shares a common social or economic interest that should be included in a single district so that it is effectively and fairly represented. Now, that's a lot of words. What does that mean in reality? It means it can be anything, actually. Most of the time, we think about things like having common language or having a common racial or ethnic origin background, but it can also be people who have children in the same schools, or people who use the same parks or the same community centers and swimming pools. Maybe people around a particular business district who want to keep that intact. Maybe you're in a water district that has poor water quality and you consider yourself a community because you're bound by the fact that your water is poor. It could be that there are wetlands near you and that maybe a district should be drawn with the wetlands in mind to include all the people who are impacted and affected by those wetlands. It could be a religious center that is sort of the focus of life in a neighborhood. It could be something surrounding a significant landmark in your town. One thing to think about is, do you like the district you're in? And if you do, what is it that makes it a good district in your mind, and figure out what those things are, and then look around you and see if that still holds true now or whether that needs to be adjusted at some point in the future. So the lines get drawn and you have the opportunity, as I said, to make public input. You don't have to wait for a formal hearing. You can just take it on yourselves to get together with your neighbors and talk about what you think ought to be done. There are ways to communicate this information. There is a mapping tool. This is one way to do it. That's called Draw My California Community. This is found on the California Citizens Redistricting Commission's website. I just showed you a picture here because you could see Solano County in there. And the lines there, I think, are just city lines. They're not district lines, by the way. And this is just one of several tools. This happened to be on the California Citizens Redistricting Commission website. And so it was an easy one for me to grab and show them to you. So this would be your opportunity maybe to draw your own map. And that's, it's a good experiment, and it would be kind of fun perhaps to draw your own map and then see what the draft maps are when they come out for you. But there are other ways that you can communicate your interest to people. You can also send a letter or write some testimony, or if there is a public hearing, go and speak during the public comment process. There is an excellent tool that has a template for writing letters and giving testimony. It's created by Common Cause, and I'll provide you with the link to that if that's something you're interested in. When you're communicating with the line drawing people, whether it's the state commission or whether it's your local commission in some way, it's important for you, first of all, to try to give your name, a name to the community. It could be the 4th Street community, could be anything really, just so that people have a name to sort of attach to it. And it's important in your testimony, whether it's written or oral, to describe it. Why do you think this is a community? What are the shared interests? What are the things that brought you together? What are the things that are important to your community that you think need to be addressed in the line drawing process? Also mentioned while you're there, are there nearby areas that maybe you think you should be joined with inside of a district? Maybe there are nearby areas that you think you should not be joined with in the district, and explain why or why not. give them as much information as you can. The business of the Redistricting Commission in particular, but also the local line drawers, is they want to hear from you. They don't know what you know about your neighborhood, about your community, about what your needs are. And this is your opportunity to tell them what this is. So actually, that is it in a nutshell. I didn't want to get into too much detail because it gets overwhelming. It's sort of abstract feeling. And so I would much rather open it to questions. The dog is raising its hand for questions, and we will work out how you relay questions to me. I'm happy to answer whatever I can. And if I can't, I will try to find the answer. Let the Solano County League know so that they can communicate the answer to you. Thank you for your attention and your interest in this. The fact that you're here is a great first step. So where are we?
Well, I did have a question. Thanks very much for this. It's interesting. So just, is the timetable for the state commission the same as local districts in terms of when they have to produce their redesign? What?
No, actually there is some state legislation now that sets some time spans and timetables up for cities and counties and school boards. The league has a local redistricting toolkit that has an appendix to it that has all of that information in it. So Niles, I know that you're in the league, so you can access it. But that is a really good tool because there are varying deadlines. What I was talking about was keyed on what the statewide rules are.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have a question. Is one of the major priorities trying to combine rural and urban areas? Is that a major consideration?
To combine them? No, actually, that would not be a good practice. You'll find that the interests of a rural community will be different from the interests of the nearby suburbs. That was one of the big complaints about congressional line drawing, in particular, before the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. I remember there was a congressional district that included places like Antioch and worked its way east. It skirted Sacramento or hit the outer suburbs of Sacramento, and then ended up in the very rural parts of El Dorado County. And you can imagine the interests of rural El Dorado County are quite different than the interests of Antioch. And so how do you get I would feel sorry for anyone who had to represent that district because everything is different about those two areas and they get smashed together into one district. So a best practice, and certainly if I lived in a rural community, I would be saying, do not include me in the suburbs. Do not. That would be the first thing I would say if I was giving testimony.
Can I make just one little reminder that people can submit questions. If you're on YouTube, you can submit your questions in the YouTube chat and they will get forwarded over to this side. Or if you are on the Zoom side, you can put it in chat or speak up. Thanks.
Oh, there's a question that has come up from time to time. Local school districts and some cities have recently drawn district lines in response to some lawsuits that suggested that their at-large districts were unconstitutional. And by recently, I mean within the last 3 years. Those lines were drawn with the census data from 2010. And those lines will have to be redrawn because they are required to use the most recent census data. And that would be the 2020 data when it comes out. It's too bad, but that's the way it is.
I have another question that relates locally to Solano County. In the 2010 census, as a result, one of the supervisors had a city separate from the rest of his district, and they weren't contiguous lines joining. It was just reached out there and grabbed that city and made that part of his district. Is that something that is still condoned? And is there, what goes on there?
It is not condoned. In fact, that's part of why there's a requirement that the district be contiguous, so that you don't have some sort of gap between, let's say, a city and then the bulk of the rest of the district. That is one of the 5 criteria that are part of the citizens redistricting rules, and actually part of the Constitution and the statute. So that would not be an acceptable practice. And I would say if I lived in the city, I would be saying no. I would be challenging that line.
Well, apparently it wasn't challenged and it was acceptable back in 2010.
Yeah, that's surprising. Yeah, the problem is it's up to the Citizens Redistricting Commission, and until someone challenges it, it's going to stand. But I find, and in the Citizens Redistricting Commission that is now meeting, it's been meeting for a little while now, they are very conscious of the rules. I hear them, I listen to their hearings from time to time, and they're very concerned about what this means and how it means. And at this point, they're a long way from drawing any lines at all. As I said, the data won't come in until maybe mid-August or later. So right now they're in the phase of collecting, in the phase of educating and then collecting information from the districts in the form of what is your community of interest? What do you want to see in your district?
So a citizen that is interested, for example, in the redistricting process as it is affecting a local school district, and hopefully we will have a role in this, but where do they start? I mean, is it just go to the school board and ask, are you guys doing anything with this? Or, I mean, is there?
As I said, consult with the law what the rules are. I would definitely, if you have a strong interest, contact the district office and find out when they intend to start that process. You may find that they're not starting it until they get the data in hand. Some districts have said that. I don't think that's wise, but they didn't ask me. So it could start, if they wanted to spend the time and energy on it, it could start now with just having people talk or submit letters, or maybe have a discussion about it in a school board meeting. But I doubt any of the line drawing process and the formal hearings will start until the census data comes out.
But everybody is mandated to have a forum like that. I mean, if the incumbents are not enthusiastic about redefining the district boundaries, let's say, I've heard about some places where that.
Okay, there's supposed to be time for public comment, and they would have to give notice in their agenda, as they do. Anything that's on their agenda, they have to give public notice for. The standard Brown Act and Bagley-Keene rules are, they still apply. They can't just sneak something in and say, oh, here it is. Yeah. That is not the way it's supposed to work.
All right, thanks. Sarah says, thanks to your presentation. She's got to go, but it's been great and very informative.
I appreciate it. This is one of those things that can be either immensely complicated or you can cover it in a short amount of time, because the devil is in the details. And when you start applying it, when you maybe pull out a map of your neighborhood and start figuring out what the lines ought to be, that's when it gets interesting. Right. But until you actually have your hands on it, if you're like me, I need to see it. I can't conceptualize it in my head. I need to draw it out and look at it. And I think a lot of people are that way. And that's probably why draft maps have to be released and public comment must come after that.
Right. Go ahead, Mary.
I'd like to ask a question regarding the various districts that are going to be drawn. As you said, there'll be congressional and assembly and water and Board of Equalization. So are we going to be seeing notices for each of these? And for instance, if we wanted to identify our community of interest as perhaps which schools we would want to keep in a school district, that would only apply to the school district lines, which we would be looking for that, right?
Well, yeah, definitely you want to look at that, particularly if you're talking about a particular school site. But in the sense of dealing with city redistricting, that might also be a component for you. That it would be kind of a shame that the school that your children go to is in your school district, but it's not in your city district. And the reason that's important is not because the city has any control over what the schools do, because they don't. But again, it's about keeping people who have similar interests together into one place. And yeah, they can't be involved in the running of the schools, but maybe the roads running past that school are in need of repair and things like that. So it would be important that the people living around that school would also be included in the school district. In the city district for that sort of purpose.
Oh,
And perhaps maybe even a congressional district. You might have interest in keeping that community together for congressional and state.
Yes, you might. Yeah, you definitely might. And moving to the larger districts, congressional and state senate and state assembly, there's an additional rule that I didn't mention in here, and that is the concept of nesting, that they want to keep a whole city in the same district. In the past, sometimes you have seen a congressional district maybe cut a city in half. And these rules would militate against that. They would say the city as a whole needs to be in the same congressional district or in the same Senate district. Same for the county, and you would want to keep hopefully the same county or most of it within the congressional district. Now, there are exceptions to that. As we talked about earlier, maybe part of the county is very rural and the other part is more urban. That might be a reason to have that split up. Otherwise, the idea is to try to keep them together, but particularly to keep cities within counties. That's an important part.
I have a question, and I don't know how it can be answered, but certainly minorities need to have equal representation, and that you made that clear in your graphics. How can we make it as equitable as possible, considering all these other factors that we have to include?
That is a good question. I think that is the question I think redistricting agencies have to grapple with. It's kind of convenient if everybody lives, next door to each other, but it doesn't work that way. So coming in and talking about the community of interest is an important part. I know in places like Los Angeles, where you might have Koreatown and Japantown, and sometimes the county board of supervisors lines will cut those towns in half. That's not good. It actually dilutes the power of that particular group and makes it harder for them to elect someone that is going to be more responsive to them. It's all a big balancing act. And that's why it's so important for we average citizens to go in and make noise about this and make sure that they understand we think this group should be kept together and that there's a good reason for that.
Thank you.
If you want to give testimony, if a group of people came together and drew like a little map of what they thought they want to keep a district intact, what would be important for either a verbal or written testimony to include, such as why it's important to you, what it is you're trying to identify? Could you explain what you think is important for a testimony?
I would say to be as complete as possible and include all of those things. Whether it's that you're next to a small business district and it's walkable for your neighborhood, and you think that should not be cut away from the surrounding neighborhood because you as a citizen feel like that's part of your neighborhood. Instead of trying to divide the business districts from the residential districts, if you feel like they're actually one whole community, describe that. You may tell like a personal story, like, I walk to this store once a week and, do my grocery shopping, or, storytelling is really good. That sort of thing is important. As I said, anything and everything you can think of, put in your testimony, whether it's by story, or whether it's in writing, which you can be much more complete on, because in public comment sessions, you usually have 2 minutes. So you can't get too detailed in that. When it comes to submitting maps, and I would never, I don't think, ever submit a map without having some sort of written testimony to explain it. But it's important in maps maybe to point out landmarks, whether they are parks, schools, some sort of landmark, even just a major thoroughfare, so that the people reviewing it have a good sense of what is there, the geographic area that you're talking about. An oral thing saying, well, bounded by Franklin Road and Elk Grove Boulevard on the north and south, and this on the east and west, maybe not as descriptive as saying there is this small shopping center that's been here since the 20s and that the entire neighborhood uses and feels safe enough to send their children to go pick up milk from. That's the sort of thing that I think is worth including in both marking it on your map and then including it in your written or your oral testimony.
Thank you.
We need to put a human face on this, let people see who we are, how we live.
That's good. Make things personal. Yeah, 'cause it must be kind of tough for the people on the panel to relate in any way to have some sense of, I mean, they're getting flooded with data from all sorts of directions. And so the more personal it is, the right, good.
Absolutely. And in 2010, they had a travel budget. They were able to go to different areas. There are 14 of them. They split up the state and tried to establish contacts within their geographic region. And by the way, they're chosen from across the state as well, with the idea that their geographic locations is an important part of who they are and why they're on the commission. And they were encouraged to, go to meetings, talk to people like we are doing right here, maybe go to a school board meeting or a city council meeting to get a feel for the community, to see what is there and to talk to people. These days they're doing Zoom and YouTube like we are, but it sure is better than nothing. And in a lot of ways, it's saving money because travel is expensive. So there are good points and bad.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I just come up with another question. Economic status. I think of Marina Del Mar and Beverly Hills. They have a community of interest, but then they go against other factors. So how do you reconcile that so that that people have different interests, but they can't all be represented in one district?
That's an interesting concept. It's a question of, well, first of all, the number of people involved. I think the number of people in the, say, upper income area versus the number of people in, well, what by contrast would be lower income areas, but if you're out here in Sacramento, it would be pretty good. It's a numbers game. How many people are there looking at their economic interests and realizing you get one representative per district. So, and they must be equal in population. So I think there's a way to try to concentrate similar economic levels, because I think it would be very difficult to have, say, 3/4 of the district in the high real estate value areas and 1/4 of the district covering a much lower real estate area. I think that would be very difficult because the needs of the lower area probably will be overlooked. It's smaller. The number of people in the district are smaller. So, and perhaps, less knowledgeable about how to manipulate the system and make themselves heard. So those are all things to think about. That's why there's a list of 5 things. They all must be balanced.
Is this graphic that you're sharing right now, is that from the Draw My Community?
Yes, it is. Yes, I forgot to mention this. And conveniently, this Citizens Redistricting Commission's website is called We Draw the Lines, ca.gov. And there's a lot of interesting information in there, but some of it includes things like this: describe your community. This is one aspect of it. Also, another related screen would be the mapping thing that I showed you. back here. Oops, too far. There, that was also something that you accessed through We Draw the Lines ca.gov. And you'll notice here, you were asking me in terms of land drawing, even this has a describe your community aspect to it. So you would click on that, fill in whatever information you thought was pertinent.
All right.
And personally, I don't know if they'll look at it, but I would love to see, particularly if you're talking about landmarks or just something to give commissioners a feel for the community, I would think photographs would be really useful too.
Mhm. All right.
I don't know that they're required to look at them, but they can give photographs or video even is a good way to illustrate why this community should be together.
Right. Good suggestions. And also, I mean, we're kind of more, well, I'm thinking more about at our local level, school districts and cities, and but the same rules apply to make it personal in a sense, so that people can see the community.
It is, and I can tell you, I live in and near Sacramento, and we're getting inundated by folks from the Bay Area. So there's a lot of push to, well, some people would call it gentrify some of the areas in Sacramento to build new housing that can be sold to the people who are moving in, which creates friction with the people who are already there, who have their own established communities and maybe really like their schools, but feel compelled because of the money involved to sell their property and move elsewhere. And having good representation, a good city council person who represents your interests would be a very valuable thing in that situation.
Yeah, housing is another topic for another.
Oh, yes, we'll be talking about that for many, many years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I find it fascinating to see how quickly things are selling here in Sacramento. Multiple offers on the same house for more than asking price. That never ever happened here before, and it's happening in now.
Amazing, and in the midst of this pandemic, still, I mean, it's crazy.
Interest rates are good.
So. Right. Yeah. Well, do we have any more questions or comments from anyone? I guess that's it for now.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your attention. As I said before, don't wait until the data hits to start telling your stories. And don't wait for the first map, because you, with your stories of your community of interest, can influence what that first map looks like. And that's a good first step. Waiting until the map's out and then saying, no, this is all wrong. I mean, you can do it. Obviously, it's your right to do it, and you have the opportunity to do that. But if you have input into the initial drawing, I think you might be happier with that first map.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. I think this really gave all of us a good idea of what the redistricting process is. Some of us have not been familiar with it before, and I think this gives us an idea of what's coming ahead and how we could participate. And thank you to all the participants out there. And I hope it's been helpful to everyone. So again, thank you very much, Carol, for being with us tonight.
You're quite welcome. Go out and make your voice heard.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night. Checking out. Let's stop the video.